control this before they control you. Today, I want to talk about the matrix and why the matrix is like a frequency grid. But more importantly, what we can do to raise beyond it. So let's get into it. So I woke up this morning wanting to talk about emotional regulation because for me, emotional regulation and learning how to understand every single emotion that's coming through my vessel and then learning how to talk myself up into certain emotions and to learn what my emotions are teaching me has been the number one single game changer in my whole entire life, besides meditation. But meditation actually goes in alignment with being able to control or regulate our emotional states. So let's first talk about why the matrix is more of a frequency grid. So we've spent a lot of time on my channel talking about the theys and the thems that rule the world. So mostly I'm thinking secret societies, shadow elite, seedy government organizations, handlers, faceless people that we can't always put a name to, but we're all aware that something is operating in the background, something is controlling these systems. But I made a video about a month ago called Our Handlers, the Archons of the Matrix. And I think that was one of the best videos I feel like I've made, because what it talks about is how handlers and manipulative people, groomers, narcissists, and those that control the world, they're more so running on systems. So we can look historically at actual systems and organizations and secret societies and literature on monarch programming or declassified articles about MK Ultra, Project Paperclip, Project Stargate, Monroe's research, etc. But at the end of the day, when we trace it back to its origins and the very symbol they show us all the time, the triangle and the eye, or the eye and the triangle. And to me, a triangle is like a pyramid. So that means that there's something on top controlling the strings. They're pushing, it's like a pyramid scheme, essentially, for how we operate in life. But pyramid schemes are when there's somebody on the top and then they train people below them, and each of those people have people below them who they train, and then those people have somebody they train. So you can see how this triangle grows and continues to spread out. So as much as I love talking about the hidden systems that run things or seem to control things around here, trying to find somebody to blame doesn't really serve us so much as asking ourselves, what can we do about it now? So we can start to recognize the patterns, which many of us are. I'm sure you have if you're on this channel. And we can recognize the fact that, like I've said in many of my videos, like the one about our doctors, handlers, that one talks about the medical system and why empaths, starseeds, gifted kids, and neurodivergent souls have a hard time healing in this kind of environment. And then, of course, our handlers, the archons of the matrix. We talk about honeypots a lot on the channel and how a lot of different things can be a honeypot. So it's not always so black and white. Like when you think of the word handler or you think of a programmer, I feel like many people might think like, oh, I have a literal handler, like I'm targeted, kind of like I'm thinking of the movie Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson and Julia Roberts, where he's a literal targeted individual and he's been programmed literally to assassinate somebody. So they have scenes of him literally going to some secret warehouse, and there some Men in Black type people inject him with something and then try to program him, and then they tape his eyelids open and make him watch stuff. So I'm not discounting that, like, real people have more than likely have that experience, especially during the MK Ultra days. So that is not hidden, and it's really really sad and really unfortunate, and I like really feel for these people, and it's not fair at all that people had to go through these things. So if you've been through that, like my heart seriously goes out to you, and I'm really sorry. I can't imagine dealing with that, especially since I've only experienced these types of people and this kind of topic and seen these systems like up close, but not so much so close that I was like unable to function or like afraid to function. I feel like my experience with it has given me enough separation from these systems that I've seen to be able to talk about it safely or in a way that I feel safe. I still have a lot of precautions, and there's a lot of things that I won't do because we're on the internet. So I definitely have my boundaries up in ways that I stay safe. But I can imagine if somebody's had some really intense situations, they may feel like they can't talk about it on a public forum. So all of that to say, this stuff is absolutely very real, but there's also subtle forms of manipulation and control going on behind the scenes and right here in our faces. And a lot of this control is able to happen through the technologies that we have. And in a lot of my videos, we always go back to the Roswell crash in the 1940s, how that was hidden, but also how they found tech from those sites, and it's been given or used by these more covert organizations and agencies that aren't always operating in public, and they're not making the public aware of what exactly they're doing. But it's pretty clear that this stuff has been going on, and it's pretty clear, like just look up Google patents. You can see that the technology that we have, like V2K, like microwave frequency technology, they have remote harassment technology, like all of this stuff they have patents for. So even if I can't find a document that says they're using it in this context, it exists, which means there's somebody on this planet who not only reverse engineered that kind of tech, but they could be giving it to God knows who, and depending on, you know, who wants that kind of tech, like they could be controlled and handled in a sense that they're not able to get that out into the good hands. So all of this, again, to say that in itself, to me, proves the existence of this kind of technology frequency that is controlling the majority of humanity. So there's another good show that talks about this concept, Fringe, which came out, I believe, around 2012. And there's an episode of this guy who comes in to the investigators because he was having premonitions of some kind of, I want to say it was like a robbery or something. So he was like hearing voices and having these premonitions. And then by the end of the episode, they basically figure out that he was in a vaccination study years ago. And I think he had some kind of heavy metals or something injected in him. So he was literally acting like a Bluetooth receiver or like an antenna to these conversations. And he was picking up on real events. So that in itself raises a lot of questions about synthetic telepathy. Like, what is telepathy that we're like literally hearing in our minds, because there's so many heavy metals like that we ingest, not only with the chemtrails and the stuff in the air, but heavy metals in our foods, our vaccines, and water. Their water quality in most states is like really bad. And even like if you know any insiders who work at these plants and they tell you straight up, it is not past standards. And you're like, what the heck? Who's signing off on this? I don't know. But I was telling somebody the other day, if you've ever worked in like industry level jobs and restaurants, like pizza restaurants, for example, or fast food places, or really any kind of serving industry, at least in my experience, knowing people who worked in those kind of jobs, for the most part, of course, this isn't going to be everybody, but this is just what I saw firsthand. A lot of these people were addicted to like MJ, showing up at work stoned, cut corners all the time. Like, we're supposed to clean out the fryers every day, except we don't do it because if it looks like it's not so bad, the manager's not going to check, so we just let it go. And I've also been a server at restaurants, and typically how that works is like people have different side work, and you may be assigned to clean the drink station one day, but and then that doesn't get cleaned until I think they get cleaned. I don't know if it's probably maybe every day for most places, I would hope, but some places like have things where you only clean it like once a week. So if somebody slips on their side work, like because they're trying to get out early because they have a date or something, because they're sick and they don't feel good, so they're naturally cutting corners. Like if you've ever been a server and gone to clean the drink machine and have seen that biofilm, that slime that's on there, like that makes me lose faith in people who are signing off on things, because that tells me if this is happening on the micro level, this is probably happening on the on the macro level too, where people who work in these organizations, like these warehouses, the water plants, things that are supposed to be, you know, verified and checked for safety by the people on top. But since there's less people on top, they can't possibly, you know, get around to every single station when there's so many to manage. So if people know that those people are only coming in once a week or whatever, or once a month, that means that they can be on their behavior, on their best behavior for that 1 month or 1 week of the month, and just enough to get it checked out for that week, and then they can go back to their lower standards after that. So it's so easy to just make some kind of business look good for a day or two when you know somebody's coming, and to be able to get by, and then that can trickle down and have an effect on the health of the citizens, whether you're getting sick because you're eating in a restaurant and you're drinking slime tea, or if it's some kind of, like it scares me to think of like things like Botox and medications that should be regulated. But again, if you are having a hard time getting people to work and you're accepting people who have less and less credentials because nobody wants to work, then you're accepting a lower quality of people who may actually care about regulating this stuff. And then you're putting the people who are using it at risk. And again, when it comes to like medical supplies and stuff like that, or like even dog food, like think of how much dog food gets sent back, or like there's a recall on products all the time. And this is mostly packaged food. So it's almost recalls that come out, or salmonella in the factory, like it's all factory products and warehouse. And again, it's probably because they have a hard time getting workers and there's too many people that they can't just regulate as well as it should be, but they just get by enough. And then when we rely on these systems, we put ourselves at risk, not knowing what's really going on behind the scenes. So that's another way, I guess, of illustrating this idea that it's the systems, the top-down systems, that ultimately control society and how we operate. And then the handlers having handlers, having handlers, having handlers. So it's not always manipulation and handling and control, and all that isn't always just a man in a desk sitting far away. It can be the very people you spend all of your time with, the ones that you see every day. And now I want to talk about manipulation and control through frequency. So we've kind of already touched on how systems are infiltrated and how the top-down pyramid system can affect, you know, the worker bees and the everyday aspect of our life. So how we have to watch out for what we're consuming and what systems we're supporting with our money. Because if we keep supporting it with our money, those systems can still survive. And the more and more we support it with our money, knowing that these bad things are going on, the more we're putting ourselves and our society at risk. So that's why I'm so passionate about, you'll see some guests that I have coming up on my show. And I'm very selective about the people I want to share with you guys, because I think we see so much manipulation here on the wide scale of things and in the macro world, that I have a really soft spot for people who are out there doing something about these systems. So I'll just use my one friend, for example. I've mentioned her, my comedy friend, how she was with me when I started comedy, and we together witnessed a lot of the corruption that took place in the industry, from Me Too kind of stuff to producers who are just not paying their comedians at all. They're exploiting them, and the rituals and stuff that are going on like that behind the scenes, and the things that these people get away with, and people keep supporting them because they want stage time or whatever. But I've talked about how she's one of the people I respect a lot, because she also saw behind the systems, and she wasn't afraid to start implementing her own and to do something that's actually supportive of the community. So then, you know, when we look back at, in this particular instance, the scene that I was a part of, when I look back on it like 2 years later after having left, I'm like so proud of her, because people are getting paid now. Like there's so much more positivity in the scene just by one person making a difference. And in the same way, I have another good friend at home that I would love to bring on and share with you guys at some point too. But she's somebody who I admire and I respect a lot because she's out there like boots on the ground. Like if she doesn't like the food systems on the planet and how these big corporations are not only like treating our animals disgustingly, which can cause disease for the people who consume them, not to mention the fear that we ingest when we're eating animals that are in those states of fear when they're slaughtered. Somebody's got to be on the ground doing the work. So she's out there at the farmer's market. She's out there using and supporting every local farmer in her community to promote this ideal. Like we should be supporting the farmers and the systems who are keeping this country alive. Because again, if everything falls into the hands of these people on top, this is where disease, this is where manipulation, this is where control originates. It's this one system on top trying to control the whole world, and that just doesn't work. And eventually, there is this idea that we can start controlling ourselves if we follow these systems. But there's enough people on the planet at this day and age that are awake to these systems. There's people out here like me as well. I consider myself a mover and a shaker, like with the animal sanctuary, seeing how things were run in the shelter, making it my goal right now. I'm not only doing this because I want a sanctuary. That's a big part of it. Like that's what I want to use my platform and my, as this channel is monetized and grows, I want to invest that money into an off-grid sanctuary where I can feed the dogs real food, give them real land like this to run around on, and then hopefully host group retreats and things like that. Don't know how that's going to look with regulations for off-grid. Apparently it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of stuff that can be really difficult to get the right permits, to have the right people on your property or the right structures. So I don't know how that's going to turn out. It's going to be a learning process for sure, but that is my goal, and in a perfect world would love to do something like that. Because I know that if we don't get out there ourselves and do this, I mean, I'm 38, like we're literally the adults now. So we have to put on the example for the younger generation. And if we don't like the way the systems are, we have to get out there and change it. Then another person that I want to bring on is my mentor. I absolutely love her. And I think it's so important for people to have mentors and people that they can do like brain dumps with and have somebody keep them accountable. And it's so different than AI too. I even talk about this with my mentor. I like to talk about AI and how they're taking over a lot of jobs, but it's like you cannot replace the heart of a person. And I can't even think of where I'd be without my mentor, so I'd love to bring her on at some point too. So anyways, all that to say that if we don't like these systems, we've got to get out there ourselves and do something about it. So that's what I'm interested in sharing my platform with. I care about people's stories, and I think it's awful what has been done. But if we live there forever, we live there forever, and it seems like there's no way forward. So that's what I want to share with people. I want to show people the way forward. And there's so many people in my life, let me take that back. There's a handful of people I really love, trust, and respect who are doing this. And I'm so proud of them. And I'm so happy to see the changes that one person can make in their community. As, in the same way that the systems on top are the theys and thems that control society, and how that trickles down, so too can the trickling down of people who have heart, who have soul, who are speaking their truth, who are living in authenticity. So I absolutely love that. But back to the frequency grid, there's technology and media. Media plays such an important role. So not only the impact that Hollywood has in the movies and what we absorb through our subconscious, I wonder where most people are at with aliens. I'm wondering if the majority of the population has a negative idea about aliens and is going to be afraid of them because of all the movies we've seen about them. And I wonder if enough people on the planet are awakened. And we understand that smart or evolved technologies exist in higher frequencies of love. That's why we can't perceive them from the third dimension of reality where we live, because they don't materialize when we're in states. Well, that's not true, because I think some people do experience the materialization of entities. But again, since the government has that tech, we don't know that every single alien abduction or encounter, we can't say with certainty that it wasn't a real entity, because it could be from that tech that they have. It could be entities that have been recreated by man, because man lives in lower states of consciousness. Man lives in fear. Man lives in revenge. Is all about self-preservation. Not all men, but a lot of them. So those who are living in lower states of consciousness. But I do believe that a group of souls has been incarnated on this planet. Either that or it's the natural evolution of humanity. And, you know, it could be a natural progression from things like the government exploring consciousness in especially in the 1950s and 60s and 1970s and 1980s, and especially in the 90s when it was implemented in the public school systems, when we had nap time, when we remember hearing the gateway tapes. So gateway tapes, the CIA was interested in studying Robert Monroe's work. They mentioned the holographic universe, and there have been so many great books that have come out since then. There's a book called The Holographic Universe. There's a book I really love called Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zeland. There are really great books that talk about reincarnation with more of a positive spin on it, because I know there's also the Gnostic view that souls are incarnated here and we're trapped and it's a luge farm and it's just really dark, and it does not serve us to think that way. If you want to think that way, you have the free will to decide to think that way. I choose to not buy into that fear-based thinking. If we are in a soul trap, maybe it's for our highest good in some way. And I do believe that when we raise our frequency and our consciousness, we start to evolve out of these time loops of negativity. So let's see. Somebody on my channel mentioned an experience about, basically they said something along the lines of an entity saying that some people stay trapped here and they keep repeating the same lesson over and over and over again. And our soul or spirit guides, or whatever you want to call them, positive archons of the matrix, if that's even a thing, but they may try to get our attention, but if we're in lower states of frequency, we can't hear them. And unfortunately, there are so many systems on the planet, from the theys and the thems and the people on top, and maybe these systems weren't all that bad at one point. Maybe they thought they were doing everything for the highest good. I don't know. But all of that to say that there's a lot of systems on our planet that are disempowering, that keep us in those lower states of fear, so that we cannot open our minds or our consciousness to these beings of higher intelligence that aren't always bad. Like, there's a lot of people that think that just because you communicate with the spirit realm or you channel something, or somebody said something about meditating the other day, and I think that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. Meditation saves lives. Meditation saved my life, and I'd be an anxious mess had I never started to meditate. I would have nothing. I would be working at some job that I hated, participating in toxic relationships, allowing men to use and abuse me, not having any self-respect. Meditation taught me all of that. It taught me how to value myself and how to love myself. And it taught me how to regulate my emotions. And that is honestly the most important thing that we should be talking about today. So all of this to say, I've been painting a picture of the frequency that we live in. So not only is it controlled by literal technology frequencies like microwave audio, V2K, that kind of technology, so that can possibly shoot out synthetic telepathy. But we also have the frequency of TV, radio, podcast, news outlets. So that's a frequency in itself. And those are all on the frequency, for the most part, the frequency of fear. Because again, somebody pointed out on my channel the other day that Netflix is owned by the Crowleys, as in Aleister Crowley, as in the father of Satanism, as in blood and gore and demonic possession. All of that is like on the homepage of Netflix. At least when I look at Netflix, it's like all the movies they want to promote are the ones that are really scary. Not to say that they don't every so often have a good movie, but even the ones that are lighthearted, like reality TV, it promotes toxic relationship patterns. Like, literally look at who they recruit for reality TV. They take humans, they pretty much, I don't know if they're forced to get plastic surgery or they just choose people who are just completely implants, injections, Botox, fillers, fake hair, fake eyelashes, fake nails, fake tan. Everything is fake. So in other words, those people are walking billboards for buy this and distract yourself, buy this and distract yourself, buy this and distract yourself. And then they make a perfect something to watch on TV because they're so, and for the most part, because there's so much superficiality that is promoted on those shows, it's all about looks, then they attract other people who are also all about the looks. So not only do they devalue themselves and they objectify themselves, but the relationship patterns shown in those shows also set an example for the people watching the shows, for them to think that this is normal, or for us to absorb the conditioning from the TV. So it's a cycle that keeps perpetuating. So we don't need our own handlers. We are our own handlers. We are consuming content with ideologies that we end up absorbing and taking on as our own because of what we're watching. So again, the people that they have on TV, and then all the celebrities now, like all these rumors about, like, are they clones? Like, what's going on? Did their soul get sucked out of their body? All these celebrities on Ozempic that are literally wasting away. Not to mention the health stuff that might come with that. And I don't know if they're really showing this on mainstream media yet, but there's absolutely stories out there for people who have been absolutely screwed over by Ozempic. And I'm thinking mostly of like a couple of people I know who have been in my, network of, 20 degrees away from me or whatever, but people who started taking it, lost weight, everything was fine and great for a couple months or however long, but then they ended up in the hospital, like suspiciously, with some mysterious stuff going on. So it just makes you wonder, somebody who's really healthy that all of a sudden starts taking this, and then I don't know if it's like losing weight too fast or if it has to do with, there's some warnings like that it was used with the Gila monster venom and can affect eyesight. So I don't know. It's just, we don't know. But that's my point. We're being brainwashed into thinking that we need these things, that we need to buy them. Then we try them thinking that it's okay, not realizing that the systems on top, the pyramid systems, they're ran and managed by the worker bees. And if the worker bees are not enlightened and they don't care about their job, then they're not regulating things properly. And then you're consuming it without a second thought. You're putting yourself at risk for the side effects that can happen. And then not to mention that, yes, although the FDA may approve something, do they have long-term effects on these drugs? Most of the time, no. They're using the people as guinea pigs. So if you want to sign up for that, and especially if you're signing up for that when you're already in lower states of consciousness, so you're deciding to take something because you feel incomplete, you feel anxious, you feel fearful, you feel depressed on the inside, you're trying to seek external validation, so you use a substance because you think it's going to be a quick fix. So rather than looking inside and working on your emotional frequency and your trauma conditioning and trying to rewire that, instead you're looking for the quick fix, the easy fix, something outside of you, like the pill to fix things. So even if things might be okay for a while, you haven't regulated yourself or learned how to regulate yourself, so you're in a chronic state of peace or happiness all the time. Instead, you never learned how to medicate your own anxiety other than reaching for the newest, latest thing. So you become a vibrational match to bad things happening, because an example of this might be like the diet that we eat. There's a doctor, I don't know the doctor's name, but who's talking about how rabbits or animals, there's some kind of animal study where animals ate food that was poisonous, and I don't know if they were like spoken bad to or negative things were spoken, but they ate food that was poisonous and they either got hurt or they died or something. And then there was a second group of animals that ate the same food and the same poisonous food, but they were held and loved and told positive things when they were testing these animals and giving them the food. And basically those animals survived, and the point of that study was to say that your body metabolizes food differently when you're not in a chronic state of stress. There's a plane. Oh my God. That's loud. Hold on. Enjoy the desert. Here we go. Okay. So, when you're in a chronic state of stress and anxiety, you metabolize things differently. And I've been thinking about making a video about like my before and after, for before I healed or had an awakening, before I got sober, before I stopped getting Botox and all the things, before I stopped using all the toxic pharmaceutical products and beauty products I was using. And I was looking through some pictures the other day when I was cleaning out my phone. I saw a picture from 2018. I look 10 years older than I do now. And it's absolutely insane because I know exactly what kind of lifestyle I had back then. Smoking, vaping, a lot of stress because I was in a lot of toxic relationships. I didn't have good boundaries back then. I didn't have good emotional hygiene. And I was always using people around me to I don't think I was consciously blaming them for how I felt. I just didn't understand how to regulate my own emotions, which is so common, which is why I want to talk about this, because this isn't about guilt or shame or like making somebody feel bad because they're doing these things, because this is something that's happening unconsciously for a lot of people. Essentially that we're using people, places, and things. Something came into my boot. We're using people, places, and things around us to justify how we feel. So whether or not we feel bad or good, we're using things outside of us to affirm how we feel. So an example might be like, my boyfriend was in a bad mood today and he said he doesn't want to move to California, or he doesn't want to have kids in the future. So now I'm going to use that as an excuse to be sad all day, or to try to change his mind, or try to be passive aggressive with him and do some kind of controlling behavior that will make him rethink it, or try to take sex off the table so he changes the way he's thinking about that, so I get the answer I want. So that's how we can use other people to control our emotions. We use them as an excuse to decide to feel bad because our boyfriend's in a bad mood today, versus being able to say, you're in a bad mood, that's your energy. If you want to be in that bad mood, by all means be in the bad mood. I'm going to go take care of myself today. I'm going to go do something that makes me happy. I'm going to go take a walk in the park. I'm going to go treat myself with a cookie, even if it's poisonous. If I eat it while I'm in a high vibrational state of gratitude, maybe it won't affect me in that way. But there's things that we can do on our own to feel better. And the other thing that I would do all the time that really helped me was meditation. So if I know very well what it's like to live with a partner when you're always walking on eggshells because they may have some anger issues or whatever. And one of the techniques I had to use to deal with that feeling of always walking on eggshells was to meditate. Okay, so that's why I absolutely love meditating, because when I'm emotionally charged and I can't turn off my anxious brain and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And oh my God, meditation stops thinking. Meditation stops thought. So you receive higher vibrational thoughts and ideas. And there's a great book that also talks about meditation. It's called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He talks about how the greatest millionaires and minds of our time often would put themselves in states of meditation or quieting down or being out in nature, which can also be meditative because your mind is quieted when you're out here. So you have access to higher vibrational thoughts and you naturally raise your vibration because being out here is grounding. Like plants and animals are all sentient beings. And when you're simply just absorbing the codes in nature, it's like your heartbeat is syncing with the trees around you, even the dead ones, like I'm surrounded by right now. Not to mention the birds chirping. That's a different frequency than your cell phone and your Bluetooth signals going off every single day, not even 6 feet from your brain. You're holding your cell phone in your pocket. There's radio frequency, there's EMF waves. There's a bunch of stuff that we're absorbing. So not only is the matrix a literal frequency grid, but there's positive frequencies that we can be absorbing too, like the birds and natures. Like, and if you think about our ancestors, and I'll use myself as an example, when I was traveling the country and car camping, I woke up to the birds every morning, and it did something different to my nervous system than waking up to a screeching alarm clock. And I am blessed to say that I have not woken up to an alarm clock in years since I've been self-employed. My body naturally wakes up at the same time every day, and it actually is really cool how my body and my sleep clock, circadian rhythm, also syncs to the seasons. I notice that when there's less sunlight, I start to get tired a lot earlier, like 2 or 3 hours earlier than I would normally go to bed in the summertime. And in the summertime, I'm a little bit of a later riser because I stay up later than I am in the wintertime when I go to bed a little earlier and I also wake up earlier. But one of the great lessons I learned from traveling was like, waking up with the sun and going to sleep with the moon, and then listening to the birds as your cue that would help you wake up. And it was very comforting. And then I also, one of the reasons, I hope that wasn't a spider web. One of the reasons I love my dog so much is they have a wonderful effect on regulating our nervous system too. So even just laying in bed with a dog and cuddling with a dog is oxytocin and relieving of those stress hormones. So back, all of that to say, which is a lot, hopefully you can start to see how when it comes to people trying to regulate their emotions with things outside of them, I guess you can use positive things like nature intended. And I don't know if some people would argue and say like, well, Botox makes me feel better and keeps me in a high vibration. I don't know. Maybe it does. I don't know. So I'm just, saying my own experience with all this, and I'm not here to judge anyone and what they need to do for themselves, but I'm just saying when I was living a life that was a lot more superficial, and I was reaching for antidepressants to feel better, and I was reaching for hair products to feel better, and I was reaching for, wishing that I could afford injectors to feel better, and reaching, for making like a Tinder or a Bumble profile because I needed male attention to feel better. Like none of that stuff worked long term. It was a temporary high, which is just as addictive as a physical substance like alcohol or MJ or even coffee, which can be addictive in a negative way. And I have stuff in my socks. Whew, sorry. But those things did not serve me. They weren't everlasting. And because I had the access to reach for them, because they were available to me, I did not, it's so hot out here. I'm never wearing a sweatshirt again. But I did not work on the shadow work that I needed to in order to regulate. I think the goal for me, and what I think would help more people too, is making it your goal to be so good at regulating your own emotions and not needing anything outside of you that you become unstoppable. So it doesn't matter if your world is falling apart on the outside or what you are experiencing, but because you're so sturdy and steady on the inside, you know exactly what to do when you start to feel anxious. So instead of spending $600 at the injector, you're like, all right, I'm gonna sit with myself and I'm gonna meditate, and that is free, and I can do that for 20 minutes and I will feel better afterwards. I don't need to spend any money doing it. Or rather than calling your ex-boyfriend or your ex-girlfriend who was toxic to you because you don't want to be lonely and don't like to be alone, instead of reaching for that, having a little bit of self-discipline and saying, all right, I'm going to try something new this time so I don't keep attracting myself to the same frequency loops and the same negative cycles. I have to be the one to break those loops. So meditation has been a great tool to help me break the thought patterns that interrupt the behaviors and prevent those behaviors from happening. If I can change the thoughts that precede them by changing the emotions that precede them, and sometimes the emotions or sometimes the thoughts come before the emotions. So really thoughts and emotions are kind of one and the same a lot of times. Thoughts that are negative thoughts like, I'll always be alone, no one will ever love me, is going to create a certain emotion in your body. So sometimes it's about learning, well, how can I challenge my own belief systems? How can I tell myself, who came up with that belief? What evidence do you have that supports that belief? How can I rewrite a more empowering belief? And then sometimes it's about the emotion, like you feel sad, so you think that sadness means something. So maybe it's time to rewrite the thoughts. Well, again, I guess it all comes down to rewriting the thoughts, because it's ultimately the thoughts that control the emotions, because the thoughts are based on beliefs that we have, but a lot of those beliefs aren't even our own. So my whole point in talking about the pyramid systems and the frequency grid and the media that programs us is that a lot of these beliefs that we have that determine our thoughts, which determine our emotions, which determine our behaviors, which determine our lives, is based on beliefs that somebody else has, that somebody else gave you. And again, it doesn't have to be one person or one system perpetuating these beliefs. It just has to be a whole system of unawakened people who keep doing and living out and playing out the same patterns because they're not awake and aware. But one person, all it takes is one person to be awake and aware, to inspire the people around them, to do something different, to change their lives and realize like, whoa, when I stopped my, handler situation because I woke up to the systems of control, I took responsibility for myself, my life, I meditated, I blocked them, I got out of their frequency. Once I realized like something was not right, I went someplace safe and got physically away from them. I know that may not always be an option, but for me it was, thank God, and that's part of the reason I could get away from it. I could physically separate myself from it, and I could emotionally regulate myself, not through MJ like I was doing for a long time, which kept me tethered to that situation, but I could instead stop the pattern of doing that, which broke the ties to that reality that I was living in, because now that I'm not easily controlled because I'm pacifying myself through the use of MJ and other substances, now I'm awakened, now I'm aware, now I can consciously decide my next move. I can consciously take an action rather than letting somebody else rather than taking an action by default, which oftentimes makes us a vibrational match to handlers, manipulators, narcissists, or the overall systems that perpetuate these kind of behaviors. Because in a system, if there's a system of bad and good, like good versus evil and whatnot, anyone who's not awake and aware is going to perpetuate either side of that system. So you can sometimes be unaware and live out the good sides of a system and be part of the positive change. And then sometimes you may unconsciously live out the bad part of that conditioning or that programming. So at the end of the day, it all just comes back to personal awareness, and then the ability to regulate our own frequency and our own emotions, and to be able to find techniques that work for us, that allow us to stop and say, okay, I realize that I'm having some anxiety right now, and I realize that I don't feel good, and I realize that if I interact with other people when I'm in this state of mind, it's not going to go very well because I'm not emotionally regulated. So what can I do to regulate myself right now? Like I said, you can meditate, you can go take a walk in nature, you could call a mentor, you can go to, if you're in a 12-step group or meeting, you can go to a support group and talk to other people about how they manage theirs, and you can learn from them. You can put on soothing music, you can eat a cookie and be grateful that you're eating the cookie. I don't know, which I know is contradicting because there's also a thing as emotional eating. So we also, there's a balance. There's a fine line between emotional eating and then maybe treating yourself on occasion, but that's not the thing that you're using for your happiness, if that makes sense. So you're not attaching your happiness to an external object. You're appreciating what's in your vicinity, but ultimately you know that your happiness is coming from how you choose to feel about a certain situation and what you choose to do about it. So I hope this has been helpful and you understand a little more about the frequency grid that we're living in, but understand also, more importantly, that you're not tethered to the systems when you're awake and when you're aware, and you have the power ultimately within you to control your own frequency, manage your own emotions. And if you feel like you need extra help, I do have tools available in my description of all my videos. I have one-on-one readings. Astrology and human design are great tools to help us understand our personal energetic blueprint and the cycles and patterns in our life that we can learn through astrology. And then I also do remote viewing tarot guidance, which brings clarity for people during sessions. But again, it's all about you. And my tarot sessions are designed to remind you that you have the power within you. So I never want anyone to depend on me for answers in that way. I use it responsibly, and I use it to help wake people up and remind them that the power is ultimately within you. So if you need tools, there's also tools like my fear inventory and belief exploration worksheet and 21 days habit tracker, which you can get for free right now. I would love it if you tipped me because I put a lot of time into it, but there's no need to do so. And I also have an ESP development course, which you can also check out if you are having trouble regulating your energy field and your emotions, that whole course is designed to help you do just that. And it's using the exact process that I use to awaken from the systems that control us. So thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.